That was the first line that lodged itself in me, like she'd pressed it against my chest and dared me to breathe with it there. I hadn't even realized I was staring. Or maybe I had. Maybe I'd been holding her in my eyes longer than I should have, tracing the way the light fell against her cheek, how the faintest smile ghosted across her lips like she was carrying a secret no one else deserved to know. She was older, mid-40s, but age didn't hang on her the way it does on some. It draped itself like silk, graceful, confident, impossible not to notice. She had that presence that filled the room without raising her voice. When she turned her head, hair brushing her jaw, it was enough to stop me mid-sentence. And me? I was still fumbling my 20s, still caught in the half-grown mess of wanting to be taken seriously, and not quite knowing how. With her, though, everything sharpened. The air between us was never casual, not even in the quietest moments. Especially in the quietest moments. That night, we sat too close. Not close enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that my arm brushed hers when I shifted. I swear, I could feel the charge of it ripple down to my fingertips. She didn't move away. She didn't move closer either. Just stayed. Like she wanted me to notice the choice she wasn't making. "Careful," she murmured when my hand grazed the edge of hers on the table. Her voice was steady, but her fingers twitched like she'd forgotten how stillness worked. I laughed under my breath, not because it was funny, but because the silence afterward was unbearable. My laugh sounded too loud, too young. She tilted her head, studying me with those eyes that made everything inside me unravel. The room was dim, only the low glow of a lamp against the wall. The light carved her profile in soft gold, catching the faint line at the corner of her mouth. I wanted to ask about it, whether it came from laughter or years of holding things back, but my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, and the neckline of her blouse shifted just slightly. I looked away too late. "That's what I mean," she said, her voice a shade lower now. "You shouldn't look at me like that." I wanted to say I couldn't help it. I wanted to tell her the truth, that her presence felt like gravity, pulling me in against every sensible reason not to. But all I managed was a small shake of my head, my lips parting before the words caught and broke in my throat. Her hand was still there, resting on the wood between us. Close enough to touch. My fingers hovered, then dropped back to my lap, the courage collapsing before it reached my skin. She noticed. Of course she did. Her eyes softened, then hardened again in the space of a second, like she couldn't decide which mask to wear with me. "You're too young," she said, though it sounded like she was reminding herself more than warning me. The clock ticked once, loud in the stillness. I swallowed. The silence pressed in, heavier than her words. And then, the door creaked open behind us. Her head snapped toward it, her hand finally pulling away from mine. I turned too, heart pounding, as a shadow fell across the room. The door had only opened for a moment, a draft of cooler air, a figure passing by without stepping in. But the silence it left behind pressed heavier than before. She leaned back, smoothing her sleeve as though nothing had happened. I couldn't look away. I told myself I should, that she was too far out of reach for this to mean anything. But something in the way her eyes lingered, even as she tried to turn them elsewhere, told me she wasn't immune either. We sat again, a little farther apart this time. The distance didn't help. "You'll ruin yourself, looking at me like that," she said softly, tracing the rim of her glass with a fingertip. I hesitated, then asked before I could stop myself. "Has anyone ever looked at you like that before?" Her lips pressed together. A pause. Then, "Once." She said it simply, like she didn't want me to ask more. But I did. "And?" Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "He left." People always leave when they realize the difference between what they want and what they can keep. Her words settled in my chest like stones. I wanted to tell her I wouldn't. That I wasn't built the same way. But I was young and she knew it. That was the risk, the age, the inevitable judgment, the whispers that would follow. I could feel it in the way her shoulders tightened, as though she already carried the weight of voices that weren't even in the room yet. I shifted closer without meaning to, caught between apology and defiance. My hand brushed her arm as I reached for the glass in front of me. It wasn't an accident. Not entirely. She stilled, her breath catching for a fraction of a second. I felt it, the warmth radiating from her skin, the tiny flinch of someone who didn't know whether to lean in or pull away. "You're careless," she whispered, but the scolding lacked conviction. "Or honest," I said a little too quickly. That made her laugh, soft, unexpected. Not mocking, not cruel. Just tired, like she'd forgotten the sound. She turned then, and her face was so close I could feel the faint brush of her breath across my cheek. My chest tightened. Every nerve in me screamed to close the space, to bridge it before it vanished. But she didn't move forward. She let the air between us do the work, thick with everything unspoken. "I shouldn't," she began, and then stopped. Her hand lifted as if to adjust my collar, a simple gesture, harmless enough. But her fingers lingered against my shoulder longer than they needed to. The fabric of my shirt warmed beneath her touch. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty this time. It was alive, waiting. Finally, she drew back, but not before her palms slid away slowly, like it wanted to remember me. When she looked at me again, there was no warning in her eyes. Only recognition. And I knew then, whatever this was, neither of us had the strength to step away. Her touch still lingered on my shoulder hours after it was gone. Every time I replayed it in my head, I swore it had lasted longer, her fingers pressing just slightly harder, as if she'd meant something by it. But she carried herself as though nothing had happened. That was her armor. Mine was silence, a silence I couldn't keep steady. The evening stretched on, and the quiet between us felt less like comfort and more like bait. I found myself watching her reflection in the window, the way the lamplight softened the hard edges of her face, the curve of her hand around her glass. My chest tightened. She must have felt me staring, because her eyes flicked to mine in the reflection. She didn't turn around. She just let me see that she knew. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words never formed. The tension was language enough. Then, the sharp buzz of her phone broke it. She startled, fumbling it in her hand before setting it face down on the table. "Who was it?" I asked too quickly. Her mouth curved into a faint, guarded smile. "No one." The lie hung heavy. I could almost hear the truth she didn't want to admit, that someone, somewhere, would never understand this. Us. Before I could press, the door opened again. A friend of hers, casual, unannounced, stepped in with a quick laugh. I froze, my pulse hammering. We weren't doing anything, not really. But still, it felt like we'd been caught. She was calm, effortlessly so, greeting them with warmth that left me on the outside. I tried to match it, but my words stumbled. I could feel her watching me beneath her practiced ease, silently willing me not to give anything away. The friend lingered only a few minutes, chatting, oblivious. When they finally left, the silence that returned was heavier than ever. Her shoulders dropped. Mine stayed rigid. "You see?" she murmured at last. "This isn't simple." I leaned closer, unable to stop myself. "Doesn't mean it isn't real." That made her look at me, really look. Her breath hitched just slightly, the smallest crack in her resolve. The space between us vanished before I realized I'd moved. I could feel the warmth of her body, the whisper of her hair against my cheek. My heart pounded in my throat. Her eyes fell to my lips. For one suspended second, the world stilled. Then she turned away, just barely, enough to stop what was about to happen. Enough to remind me of everything we weren't supposed to be. But she didn't move farther. She stayed close, her shoulder brushing mine, her hand resting on the table between us, only inches from mine. "Don't," she whispered, though her voice trembled. I didn't touch her. Not yet. But I leaned in just enough that my words brushed her ear. "I can't pretend I don't want to." She closed her eyes. Her hand shifted, fingertips grazing mine like a secret no one else could see. And neither of us pulled away. Her hand was still resting near mine, barely grazing, as if the smallest movement could shatter everything. I told myself to breathe, but each inhale felt jagged, too loud. She broke the silence first. "This, whatever this is, it has to stop." Her words were firm, but her hand didn't move. Instead, her fingers curled the tiniest bit closer, as if betraying her mouth. I leaned in, my voice rougher than I meant. "Then why are you still here?" Her eyes lifted, sharp, unsteady. For the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. Instead, she turned her face slightly, like she needed distance, but I caught the tremor in her jaw. I reached up before I thought better of it. My fingers brushed a loose strand of hair back from her cheek, slow, reverent. She stiffened, but didn't stop me. My hand lingered too long, the side of my thumb grazing her temple, memorizing her warmth. "Don't," she whispered again, but the word cracked this time. "Say it like you mean it," I murmured, leaning closer until I could feel the ghost of her breath. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she exhaled, soft, shaky, straight against my mouth. My pulse raced, every second stretching into something unbearable. "Do you know what people would say?" she asked suddenly, breaking the spell. Her eyes burned, glassy with something I couldn't name. "A boy and a woman old enough to know better. They'd tear me apart." I swallowed hard, my hand still hovering near her face. "I'm not a boy." That made her flinch, not in rejection, but in recognition. Her gaze dragged down, unsteady, landing where my chest rose and fell too fast. I leaned forward, reckless now. My knee brushed hers under the table. She didn't pull away. Instead, she shifted closer, so close her shoulder pressed into me. The weight of her body against mine nearly undid me. "I can't do this," she said, but her voice had lost its edges. "Then tell me to stop." I breathed against her ear. My lips hovered a whisper from her skin, and she shivered. Her silence was an answer. The room felt too small, the lamp too dim, the air too thick with everything we weren't saying. My hand found hers under the table, trembling, hesitant. When I finally laced my fingers through hers, she let it happen. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If I give in, you already have," I said, my voice low, raw. Her head turned then, suddenly, almost colliding with mine. Our lips were so close I could feel the shape of her breath against me. And then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, closer, sharper. She froze, eyes wide, her grip tightening around my hand. Neither of us moved, caught at the very edge of something we couldn't take back. The footsteps passed, fading into silence again, but the moment had already splintered. She pulled her hand from mine at last, the motion sharp, almost desperate. I felt the ghost of her warmth vanish too quickly. "We can't keep pretending this is harmless," she said, standing abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet room. She paced, arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if holding herself in place. I followed her with my eyes, throat dry. "I'm not pretending." That stopped her. She turned, slower this time, studying me. Something in her face shifted, softer, then harsher, then back again, like she couldn't land anywhere safe. And then she said it. I knew. From the beginning. I knew how you looked at me. My stomach dropped. You what? I let it happen, she whispered, voice breaking in the middle. I wanted to see how far you'd go. And I told myself I was only imagining it. That you'd lose interest. That I was still in control. The admission knocked the breath from me. She wasn't innocent in this. She hadn't been pushing me away the whole time, she'd been circling, testing, waiting. You lied, I said, but my voice came out low, almost reverent instead of angry. Her arms tightened around herself. I didn't lie. I omitted. I didn't tell you how much I wanted it, too. The room swayed. My pulse thundered in my ears. She stood there trembling, not from weakness but from restraint. When I moved toward her, she stepped back too quickly, colliding with the edge of the table. The sound rattled sharp. Her breath caught, her hands braced against the wood as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. You don't understand, she said. If anyone knew, if anyone saw us. I closed the space, reckless again, until I was standing inches from her. She froze, eyes darting between my mouth and my eyes, her lips parting with shallow, uneven breaths. You're scared of them, I murmured. But what about me? What if I'm scared of losing you before I even have the chance to? I cut myself off. The words felt too much, too soon. She turned her head, but not enough to break away. My shoulder brushed hers as I leaned closer, her body heat radiating against mine. Every nerve screamed at me to touch her, to end the torment. Her hands clenched the table, knuckles pale, before she finally whispered, You should leave. Before we cross the point of no return. But her voice betrayed her, softer than the command needed to be. I leaned down, so close my lips nearly grazed her hairline. Then tell me you don't want me. Her silence burned through me. And then, instead of pushing me away, she shut her eyes and tilted her head back the smallest degree, an unspoken surrender, a decision she couldn't take back. Her head tilted back, just barely, and that tiny gesture was enough to undo me. The tension that had coiled between us for so long snapped into something sharper, unavoidable. I stood so close I could hear every uneven breath she took, feel the rise and fall of her chest brush against mine in quick, shallow movements. My hand lifted before I could think, hovering beside her face. I wanted to touch her. I was terrified to. You should leave, she whispered again, but this time her voice trembled. If you stay, I won't stop you. The room seemed to hold its breath. My heart hammered, my skin burned, my throat ached with the weight of all the words I couldn't say. Slowly, I let my fingers trace the line of her jaw, light as air, until my palm cupped her cheek. She shivered under the touch, closing her eyes like she couldn't bear to meet mine while she allowed it. Her hand rose then, catching my wrist. For a second, I thought she'd push me away. Instead, she held me there, pressing her cheek more firmly into my palm. Why me? She breathed. Her voice cracked, low and vulnerable. I swallowed hard. Because you're the only one I can't look away from. Her eyes opened at that, sharp and searching. Whatever she found in mine seemed to weaken her resolve. She leaned forward until her forehead rested lightly against mine. The contact was so simple, but it lit every nerve in me on fire. I'm too old for this, she whispered, almost to herself. Then let me carry it, I answered. My voice was rough, unsteady, but it was the truest thing I'd ever said. For a heartbeat, she stayed there, trembling. And then she moved, not much, not reckless, just enough. Her lips brushed mine, tentative, a fragile surrender. It wasn't a kiss yet. It was the breath of one, the ghost of everything we'd been holding back. But it was enough to break the dam. I leaned in the rest of the way, and this time she didn't stop me. Her mouth met mine in a kiss that was messy, trembling, alive. It wasn't practiced or perfect. It was too much, and not enough all at once. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me there, while mine pressed against her waist, feeling the heat of her body through the thin fabric. We broke apart only to breathe, foreheads still touching, both of us unsteady. Her eyes searched mine, wide, unguarded. "What have we done?" she whispered. "Finally stopped lying," I said, my voice raw, shaking. Silence wrapped around us again, but this time it was different. Not heavy, not suffocating, just honest. We didn't need to say more. We both knew it, the line was crossed, and there was no going back. For the first time, she didn't look away. And for the first time, I understood, she wanted this just as much as I did. The kiss left us breathless, leaning against each other like the room itself had tilted. Her hand was still at the back of my neck, mine at her waist, either of us ready to let go. The lamp hummed faintly in the silence, the rest of the world pressing its nose against the glass but never stepping in. When she finally pulled back, it wasn't with the sharpness I'd braced for. It was slow, careful, her eyes still locked on mine as if she were afraid I'd vanish if she blinked. "This is madness," she whispered. "Maybe," I said, brushing my thumb against her cheek. "But it's ours." Her lips trembled at that, not from fear, not anymore. She exhaled, a sound that seemed to carry years of resistance finally giving way. I thought she might push me off, retreat into the armor she wore so easily. Instead, she leaned into me, her forehead resting against my shoulder. My arms closed around her, tentative at first, then tighter when she didn't resist. She fit there like she'd been carrying the same weight I had, and now we were setting it down together. "I've spent half my life worrying what people think," she murmured against my shirt. "I don't know if I can stop." I pressed my lips lightly to her hair, not needing her to look at me. "Then don't stop all at once. Just stop right now. With me." Her laugh was soft, shaky, but it was there. She shifted, turning her face up to mine again. For the first time, her hand sought mine, fingers threading together with surprising certainty. That small, ordinary intimacy hit me harder than the kiss had. "People will talk," she said, but it sounded less like a warning now, more like a prediction she was already willing to face. "Let them," I whispered. "They don't get to decide this." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm. Full. She leaned closer until her temple brushed mine, until we were sharing the same breath, the same fragile peace we'd been too afraid to touch before. No more almosts. No more holding back. She kissed me again, softer this time, deliberate, sealing something we both knew couldn't be undone. When we broke apart, she stayed close, her hands still woven with mine, her head leaning against me like she'd finally found somewhere she could rest. For the first time, either of us looked for the exit. We sat there in the dim glow, side by side, our silence saying everything. It wasn't simple, it wasn't safe, but it was real. And that was enough. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?